Wednesday evening, everyone. You are watching Maryland GOP's Direct Line program. Today's special guest is Roman Buhler from 9 Save 9. He is, we're having some technical issues, but we will bring him on as soon as we get on. But our host and our hostess with the mostest, Jackie Saxton and Mark Hunkerfer, they will talk about the issues of the day. Take it away, guys.
Yeah. Well, we're waiting for... Go ahead.
Yeah, we love being at the power of other people's technical difficulties. It's the struggle. Yeah, so how are you doing, Mark? Live from New Jersey. For once, I'm not the one live from New Jersey.
There you go. So our guest who will be joining us shortly is Roman Buhler, and the organization that he's involved with is promoting a constitutional amendment to specify that there be 9 justices on the Supreme Court. So, Jackie, what do you think about that?
I mean, to me, it sounds like common sense. We've certainly heard other attempts by the left in the past couple of years to try and pack the Supreme Court, particularly after Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation. Oh, there's my mom. So it's definitely, I think, something that should be a bipartisan, let's get behind this, because if the left can do it, there's nothing stopping the right from doing it when we take control of the House and Senate, God willing, in November. So to me, this seems like common sense on both sides. Nobody wants this to happen because both sides are just going to keep packing it, and all of a sudden, years down the line, we're going to have 121 people on the Supreme Court. And it's just
well, that was actually the observation that Isla Shapiro made on when he was on Direct Line and talked about the prospect of, okay, so if one particular, a couple of justices get added, then there's a change in control. You end up with even more justices. And you end up with kind of an arms race as justices get increased to some absolutely unwieldy number. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense.
100%. So I think it's going to be really interesting. We get to talk to Roman about that. But if we're talking about news of the day, I think the big headline coming out of last night, or the 2 big headlines, the first one being Liz Cheney's defeat. Pretty sweeping. I don't know if you listened to her speech last night. I thought it was really interesting to hear and to see today what her plans moving forward are going to be, which I think, in a surprise to nobody, are going to be starting an organization whose sole purpose is to make sure that Trump doesn't return to office.
Well, we'll wish her good luck with that. You know, it's an interesting phenomena on sort of election night defeats. Frequently, you'll hear the defeated candidate make all sorts of claims and about what they're going to do in the future. And in the relatively near future, reality sinks in. And I suspect reality will sink in with her as she recognizes there isn't really a broad constituency for her within the Republican Party for her to be president. And particularly if, as far as I can see, the only rationale she's offering for president on the whole host of issues out there is sort of not Trump.
She's going to have to fight Larry Hogan for that one.
Well, Larry Hogan, Chris Christie, and a bunch of others. And I'm not sure if you want an alternative, even if you want an alternative to Trump, that simply not Trump is going to be enough to carry the day. And I'm not sure she thought that through very well.
And I also think the margin by which Harriet Hageman won, more so than any of the number of wins that Trump has gained this primary cycle, really speaks to the hold that he continues to have on the base. What's going to be interesting, and Dwight and I were talking about this before the show started, is how is that going to translate in November? We know that Trump has a hold of the base. Does he still have a hold of the general population, especially with the utter failure that is the Biden administration? And on top of that, what impact does the raid on Mar-a-Lago have? Because my personal opinion is that it's making Trump more sympathetic, because he is really playing up this message, and he's completely right, is if they can do this to me, they can do it to you.
Well, I think that's true. I think there's a broad suspicion about the Department of Justice, and I think that this only increases the suspicion that results from that. That said, this may well be only the first shoe of a number of shoes that will continue to drop from the Department of Justice. I find it fascinating, though, that the focus has been on the FBI, when by all accounts they were in effect exercising basically the Department of Justice. Now I understand, obviously, there's a history with the FBI, but it's important to recognize that this particular prosecution seems to be coming directly from the top of the Department of Justice.
Which I think is an important point to make, because there's been a lot of people, calling out the individual agents who conducted the raid, which I don't agree with. These are people doing their jobs. I'm all for criticizing the people at the top who thought that this was a wise decision. I think it's going to come back to bite them in the ass. But if we're going to be better than the left, and I like to think we are, we shouldn't be doxing innocent people doing their jobs.
Yes, well, but let's come back to the prosecution. A lot of this potential prosecution, a lot of this comes down on some extremely untested theory, just untested theories of where the motive or the intention of the President Trump, are being sort of assumed or being attributed to him. And in a court of law, it may be much more difficult to be able to substantiate the theories. So I think of, okay.
Hey guys, breaking news. Our special guest is
there he is, Ramon Buhler. Well, welcome. Good
welcome.
To see you.
See if we
Take
can.
it away, guys.
Oh, there he is. Yep, we hear you.
All right,
So
can you see me now?
We
Yes,
see you,
we
we
see you
hear
now.
you. Everything's running smoothly.
All right,
So I
you see
know-
all those books in the background, huh?
Yeah. So
Great.
let me just briefly start. We have a short amount of time to do that. Ramon, we've known each other for a number of years. This is a new undertaking for you. Tell us what you're trying to do with the Supreme Court and with the constitutional amendment.
Well, I as some of you may know, I worked for 14 years as the chief lawyer for Republicans in the House of Representatives on election issues. And so I got to know Ed Meese and some other constitutional folks during that time. And about 3 years ago, we began to notice chatter in the liberal media about their goal of packing the court. And there was a very compelling piece in the Wall Street Journal, which described a pretty dangerous strategy. The left, basically, in this article, basically all they have to do is wait until their next majority, their next decisive majority, and those happen pretty regularly, about every 15 years in the last 100 years. And when they get it, when they get a majority that is bigger than where they don't need Manchin and Sinema, they can get rid of the filibuster. 48 Democrats have already announced that that's their intention. Biden said the filibuster is a relic of, slavery, essentially. And so it's pretty clear Democrats are going to get rid of the filibuster when they have the chance. And when they do that, then they'll probably be able to add D.C. and perhaps Puerto Rico with states, which, whether you agree with it or not, is going to give them a couple of extra or maybe 4 extra votes in the Senate. And with those votes, they could very easily vote to pack the court. And the analysis that a lot of people talk about is, well, if Democrats actually had the votes to pack the court, if they had 54 or 56 votes in the Senate, would they do it, or would they step back? And our analysis is that all of the major interest groups, or almost all of them that fund Democrats in Congress, have a stake in a court that will uphold their agenda, because a lot of their agenda, it would be considered unconstitutional by the current court. And very rarely have I seen politicians faced with an opportunity to vastly increase their own power step back because of an abstract principle. And, there's some smart Democrats that know that court packing won't work in the long run, because if they do it, the next party in charge will do it, and then we'll just lose an independent court. But interest groups generically are more interested in short term than long term. And so it's very difficult for interest groups to step back from power. And if you watch the decline of the filibuster over the last 20 years, first the Republicans proposed it. Most Democrats said no. Some Republicans said no. But then the Democrats couldn't resist the temptation to do it. And Mitch McConnell famously warned them that they would regret it a lot sooner than they thought. And of course, they did. But that hasn't stopped them now. They don't seem to have learned anything from that experience, and they're hell-bent on getting rid of the filibuster. So the problem is, what do we do? And almost everybody on our side, and a lot of people, the majority of the country, they don't like court packing, but they don't know what to do about it. And so Ed Meese's advice was, if you're going to do a constitutional amendment to ban court packing, it can't be a partisan thing. It can't be introduced by Republicans. And so we went out and we spent a year, and we found a Democratic former Attorney General of Virginia, a gentleman by the name of Andy Miller, who will be one of the heroes of American history if this amendment is proposed and ratified. And he put together a coalition of 15 former attorneys general, including half who were Democrats. And we came up with an amendment which we call the Keep 9 Amendment. It would be the shortest amendment ever to the Constitution, 13 words. It just says the Supreme Court of the United States shall be composed of 9 justices. Most Americans think it's already in the Constitution. When we poll it, 60% say yes, only 25% say no. 46% of Democrats say yes, only 37% say no. Majorities of African American voters and Hispanic voters would favor it. So it's a pretty popular concept. Then we got a Democrat, a fellow named Colin Peterson, who lost the last election. He was in a fairly Republican district, but he was at the time the ranking Democrat, on the chairman, in fact, of the Agriculture Committee. He was a senior Democrat. He's a moderate, and he introduced it. And at first, Republicans didn't want to get on because he was a Democrat, but some did. And now 179 Republicans, 80% of the House Republican Conference, are co-sponsors of that bill. And 3 weeks ago, McCarthy and Scalise put that bill in a procedural motion. They put it on the floor, and 218 Democrats voted to kill it. So it is now a kind of a Republican talking point in the House. In the Senate, we got Ted Cruz to introduce it. Ted Cruz is a visionary, but he's not Mr. Popularity in the Senate. So there's some senators who have hesitated because they're not sure they want to empower Ted Cruz. But among the supporters in the Senate are Rob Portman, Chuck Grassley, Mike Lee, even Susan Collins. So we have a very broad base. There are 24 senators that now support this. And for those of you that know something about Senate procedure, which I confess I don't know a lot about, Senator McConnell, the leadership, has designated the Keep 9 Amendment a Rule 14 measure, which means in English that McConnell and the leadership can bring it out of committee at any time without having to go through the process. That's an indication to us that McConnell sees the power of this issue. So, what's the political environment now? We have built a network around the country. One of the reasons we got 179 Republicans without hiring a lobbyist was because we had a grassroots network that worked. We've also passed resolutions in 19 state legislative chambers urging Congress to propose the amendment. What's happened in the races is Democrats understand that they got creamed in 2020 because they were perceived as the party of court packing. So Fetterman in Pennsylvania says he's against court packing. Hassan in New Hampshire says she's against court packing. Democrats in Nevada, in Colorado, in Arizona, the Democratic senators all say they're against court packing. And if you check, most congressional Democrats in tight races are also saying either they're not interested in court packing or they're against it. So how do we smoke out their true intentions? Well, it's pretty simple. We asked Democrats, well, if you're against court packing, will you support an amendment first introduced by a Democrat to ban it? And if they say yes, then they're on our side. But Pelosi and Schumer are not going to let them say yes. So they're going to have to give some kind of an evasive answer. And that's going to look pretty bad to swing voters. But to make that strategy work, and I think, frankly, that the super PACs are already thinking about it, they need our help. We have to make the Keep 9 Amendment better known. Because if a tree falls in the forest, no one's watching. I didn't see almost any news stories about the vote in the House to kill the Keep 9 Amendment. Just Fox Nation had it on, but no one else. So we need to do some work in the next 90 days not as advocates, but as educators, to educate the American public that there is a solution to the court packing dilemma. There is a way to prevent this country from becoming a banana republic where one side adds judges and the other side adds judges, and we end up with 14 or 18 or 29 judges on the Supreme Court. And even Joe Biden says he was afraid that would happen. But we need to educate people that there is a Keep 9 amendment, that it's backed by more than 200 members of Congress. It was first introduced by a Democrat, and you need to know where your elected officials stand. So that's our job. And at stake is, number one, this could be one of the decisive factors in some swing races in 2022. It could be even more powerful in 2024, because imagine the contortions that the Democratic candidates for president will have to go through if we've made this an issue. But the most important element, in my opinion, is that if we don't get this amendment before the left gets their next big majority, we could end up with a packed court. And try to imagine the Super Bowl where the home team could pack the referee pool. You'd have a super riot instead of a Super Bowl. And so there's an argument that American democracy really is at stake. So what I'm interested in, the reason that I accepted Mark's invitation, is because we need people like you to help. Now, you think, well, what can we do in Maryland? Well, first of all, we need Larry Hogan to endorse this amendment, and that's going to take some people talking to him. We need Dan Cox to endorse this amendment. And we need people, volunteers, who care about the future of the country, not just one issue or another, to join our effort. And so, the first thing people could do, if you think what I'm doing and what we're doing is important, is to email us at leaders@keep9.org. leaders@keep9.org. And we can talk about the various different things that we're doing. We need surrogate speakers. We need people to write op-eds. We need people to call talk shows. We need people simply to spread this on social media. And most of all, we need people to call the elected officials they can vote for and ask them to support the amendment. And if they're supporting it, to talk about it. And if they haven't taken a position, to demand that they let voters know where they stand. So that's what we're doing. The website is keep9.org. And
is that 9 spelled out, or is that the number 9?
You can use either one, but we prefer NINE.
Could you help us a little bit, just refresh people's memory, understanding of sort of what the process is? This is a constitutional amendment. You've sort of started with the process with the House. Can you kind of take us through what the steps would be to get through that constitutional amendment put through? Right.
First of all, we're doing it the way that the other 27 amendments to the Constitution have been done. There's no consensus in either the country or in the Republican Party or in the conservative movement about the value of calling a convention. So we're definitely using the time-tested strategy. It takes a two-thirds vote of the House and Senate to propose the amendment, and then a majority vote of each of 38 states, 3/4 of the states, to propose it. To ratify it. And, people say, oh my God, how are you ever going to get Democrats to vote for this? But if you look at the history of constitutional reform in the last 100 years, we had a women's right to vote, we had prohibition, the repeal of prohibition, we had presidential term limits, and most recently, the 18-year-old vote, all of which were very, very simple issues. But the public found out about them, and they were overwhelmingly on one side, and eventually the politicians came around. And we think that if Keep 9 Amendment becomes a household word in America, and enough Democrats lose their elections because they are perceived as court packers, because in spite of whatever they say, they're not supporting the amendment, eventually the practical wing of the Democratic Party will say, why are we losing elections for a stupid idea that isn't going to work anyway? Because if we pack the court, the other side's going to pack the court, and we're just going to lose an independent Supreme Court. And I think eventually, just like if I may use an example, Republicans don't talk about cutting Social Security anymore because it cost them a few elections. I think if we make this an issue, Democrats will eventually decide that it's better to join the bipartisan consensus against court packing and concentrate on raising taxes and borrowing money, which are things they like to do a lot more.
So the strategy between now and November is to get the word out that we cannot support candidates who support court packing, and the goal is to get the amendment voted on and passed going into the next Congress, right?
I don't think. I mean, I'm being honest here. Democrats. It took Republicans a long time to learn to stop talking about cutting Social Security. I think Democrats will try to this year pretend they're against court packing and they won't support the Keep 9 amendment. And I think a bunch of them will lose for that reason. And it would be great if a couple of them lost in Maryland, partly because they wouldn't support the amendment. But that's not going to teach them. They're going to think they can get away with this again. And the pressure from their interest groups is going to be great. So their presidential candidates are going to try to finesse the issue. And I think if we win in 2024 and we beat some more senators, maybe even guys like Joe Manchin, who say they're against court packing but won't support the amendment, then I think maybe in the spring of 2025, Democrats will say, holy cow, we really lost a lot because we're still a party of court packing. And they'll start to think maybe we should switch. And so I think our best shot is in the period when we're in charge, when we have the bully pulpit, when they've already lost a few elections. And in 2025 or 2026, Democrats might decide that they ought to surrender on this issue. And if they don't, we may have to beat them again. But the more this issue becomes known and the more people are speaking out about it, the sooner it'll happen.
So you're far and away a more patient person than I am. 2026. Wow. So because we have a lot of state party leaders who watch our podcast, watch our little program here, particularly those of the Women's Federation, Young Republicans, et cetera, and they want to hold events to get the word out about this, how do they go about doing that? I know obviously you shared that email. Do they have literature that you guys have that they can download? What is the best way that we can help you?
So the most important thing that people can do who want to help, because it depends on the district they live in, on their talents, is to email us at leaders@keep9.org, or heck, this is a podcast, call me, 202-255-5000, 202-255-5000. Call me, say, I want to help, I have some questions, and then we can talk about specific things. Young Republicans could play an incredible role in a lot of different ways. The National Federation of Republican Women has made this one of their top legislative issues, but we need grassroots activists willing to put their shoulders to the wheel. We're looking for volunteers who might be willing to help us coordinate some of the efforts that we're doing around the country with other volunteers. Information you can get at leaders at www.keep9.org, and we're willing to send out literature and buttons and all that other stuff to people who want to speak at events.
One of the fascinating things I saw on your website with Keep 9 was sort of asking for 5 seconds. Was it 5 minutes of effort? Not 5 seconds, 5 minutes of effort. So talk about, I've never seen sort of volunteer effort pitched quite that way. Could you describe, which is good. I mean, it kind of like, okay, there's obviously a hierarchy of participation. Talk to me about what somebody can do in 5 minutes to make all of this that much more effective.
So one of the things we did last year, which was the most fun, was the Biden administration had a commission to examine Supreme Court reform, but they steadfastly refused to give any serious consideration to the most popular, widely supported specific Supreme Court reform in America, which was ours. And the reason, of course, was the Biden commission was really a debate about, should we pack the court right now, or should we preserve the power to pack the court so we can do it later? And the idea of banning court packing was never something that they wanted on the agenda. But because we had a team out there for a while, the largest single number of people who had communicated with the commission about any issue were our advocates who were saying, talk about Keep 9. So in 5 minutes a month, anybody can do one of 3 very easy things. They can pick up the phone and call an elected official they can vote for and ask them where they stand on the Keep 9 amendment. Very simple. They could pick up the phone and they could call their favorite talk show. And if they can get through, they tell the producer, I'd like to talk about Keep 9. And so producer notes that. They could sit down on their computer and write a little letter saying, one one of the most important issues this year is the Keep 9 Amendment to ban court packing, backed by 200 members of Congress and first introduced by a Democrat. Bang, very easy. And so there are all these little things that people can do. They can send an email to a bunch of their friends and say, hey, what do you think of this Keep 9 Amendment to ban court packing? So all of these are little 5-minute things that anybody can do. And if they're in touch with us, if we have a specific target, like last year we did with the commission, we can email them and say, hey, look, would you take 5 minutes and let's put 1,000 emails on target with this particular influencer or person whose attention we want to attract. So those are things that people can do. And, our goal is to have a very broad movement with a few people who want to do a lot, but a lot of people who will just do a little to help save the country.
Yeah, Mark, I think I see some texting campaigns in our future.
Sounds good. I was going to point out that you participated at the Maryland Women's Federation. I think you did it remotely, but you also had a speaker present at their convention in Ocean City. And I will tell you that I heard back from quite a few who were really impressed and very interested in the idea. So within Maryland and among the Maryland Republicans, there's actually been a fair amount of traction already with the idea.
Well, I appreciate that. And Jenna Gilbert, who made that presentation, or she was one of the people who made a presentation, did a fantastic job. And so the key is getting people who are excited to reach out so that we can tailor an involvement program that meets their needs. Somebody who has an hour a month can have a different impact than someone who has 5 minutes a month, or someone who wants to spend an hour a week.
Sorry, I didn't mean to shoot low with the 5 minutes, but I was 5 minutes a month. We certainly would encourage more participation than just that, right?
I say, if I want to give some other people inspiration, you certainly inspired me, Ramon. And after we hang up from this stream, my next call is going to be the national political director of the Young Republicans to say, hey, we have a crap ton of deployments coming up across the country. Maybe this is something we should be adding to our script. And
we would love to have the National Young Republicans at their next board meeting endorse the amendment and urge their chapter leaders around the country to reach out to us so that we can talk. If somebody's in Mississippi, there are a whole bunch of things they can do. If they're in Wyoming, there are a whole bunch of things they could do. And young Republicans, I used to be a young Republican. Young Republicans are some of the most effective grassroots advocates out there, as I'm sure you know. So
as a chapter chair, I can say, and I tell everyone this, young Republican is a state of mind. So you are still a young Republican in my heart. And I say that because that means I can still take your $25 for membership. So
okay, all right.
So I know we have to let you go in a few minutes. Is there anything else you want to make sure you got in?
I would just say that the most important thing is, if you want to learn more, go to keep9.org. And if you want to learn how you can be involved, email us at leaders@keep9, the word spelled out, .org. Email us at leaders@keep9.org. That would be the thing I'd want people to remember.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We know you actually have to jump on a call with your folks at 8 o'clock. And so we certainly don't want to hold you up from that. But Ramon, thank you for taking the time to join us on Direct Line.
Well, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it a lot.
Yep. And for all of our viewers, we have a lot of really exciting episodes coming up. We're going to be having gubernatorial candidate Dan Cox on in the next few episodes. We're working on getting some of our other state representative leadership on. And so definitely stay tuned for some great future episodes.
And don't forget the Chesapeake First Ladies.
Yes, and the Chesapeake First Ladies.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.